The bodies lay piled up. Someone is watching. She had told her sister, it just feels creepy. It's like someone is watching me. And she swears it wasn't her. And the chimney was smoking. And the bodies lay piled up. Someone is watching. Welcome to Extraordinary Stories. Hey, how are you? Are you well? Are you good? I am. Okay, so this episode, we're talking scary. Or, well, to be more specific, we're talking creepy. I might have said this before, I don't tend to find gruesome things particularly scary. Like, like a film where it's like a bloodbath. Like, no thanks. That's not really for me. But something that's got a creepy vibe, love it. I absolutely love it. So that's what these stories are. Yeah, there's a bit of a bloodbath at one point in one of them, but it's the creepy nature that I'm into. Okay, so shall we get started? Just before I do, thank you so much for the messages on Facebook and in the reviews asking for me to stop singing. Well, you know what? I will do. Look, I listen to what the people want, and if the people demand that I stop singing, then so be it. No more. Just the stories. Okay, Treacle, are you ready? Okay, let's go. As I said, we're talking creepy. 'Cause I'm a creep. I'm a weirdo. What the hell am I doing here? I don't belong here. Hopefully that's set the tone. Alright, we've all had weird moments with our phone, yes? Such as a text that you thought you had sent and the person says, oh, I never got that message, or sometimes you get things through twice, etc., etc. Well, these kind of things are normal. These things are very normal. What's not normal is when your phone takes on a life of its own and causes one of the most baffling stories with death threats, stalking, and some very upsetting messages. Let's go to Fircrest, Washington in the United States of America. And it's 2007. Now, Fircrest is a nice suburb. It's near the city of Tacoma, and it's a popular place to raise families with good schools, university, fairly safe compared to other parts of Washington. And so within this area, picture, if you will, the Kuykendall family. Now, they are a nice family. There is mum, dad, and 2 teenage children, a boy and a girl. Now, the girl is 16 years old. Her name is Courtney, and it's with Courtney that this story begins. Courtney, like most 16-year-olds, has a mobile phone, or a cell phone for you Americans. Now, Courtney's at school one day, just your average day at school, nothing to report. And at the end of the school day, she's leaving. One of her friends turns to her and she says, "Why did you text me that?" And Courtney is confused. She doesn't remember sending her friend a message that day. So her friend takes out the phone, shows Courtney, and there's a text message. From Courtney, sent to her friend, it just says the word gay. Now, I was trying to work out if 2007, I think it was later. When was the time? Hopefully the time has passed, but do you remember the time when gay used to be used like as a slur? People it became like a sort of thing that people said, like, "Oh, that's totally gay," would be a way to describe things. Remember there was a big trend for that, like, "Your jacket is pure gay." I think it was later than 2007, but anyway, this is what Courtney's friend has on her phone, and she wants an explanation. And Courtney says, "Look, that's weird because I did not send that message, okay?" End of story. Courtney goes home, they part ways, fine. But not really fine, because when Courtney gets home, she has some very unhappy family members to deal with. No one in the Kuykendall family is particularly happy with Courtney because they've all, on that day, received the exact same message. One word, gay. Now, she's trying to say, "Look, this also happened at school, and I swear this wasn't me." And they're like, "Courtney, it's from your phone. It says it's from you." And she's saying it wasn't. At this point in the story, I stopped and thought, what if she's trying to tell people that she's gay? That she's not. So that theory goes out the window. But that was just an odd thought I had for a moment. I thought, I wonder if she's trying to come out and just not doing it very well. Anyway, it's not that. But anyway, she's trying to convince her family. She's like, "I didn't do this." They're not convinced. And what they're saying to her is, "Look, if that was just a silly little prank that you thought was going to be funny, it's not, so cut it out." Okay, done and dusted. But it's not done and dusted. Not by a long shot. In the following days, Courtney's mum will receive a message from her daughter which makes her blood go cold. It simply says, "I'm going to kill you." Okay, what a horrendous text to get from your own child. So her mum, understandably, is terrified. She sits down with her husband and they decide, right, well, we need to talk to Courtney about this. So they sit Courtney down, they show her the message. Courtney says, "This wasn't me, didn't come from my phone, I didn't send this." They don't believe her and they start wondering, is she having some kind of breakdown? Does she need like therapy or some additional support? Is there something going on? Then it's going to take an even weirder turn. Courtney gets out her phone and she shows them that she has received the exact same message. Over the next 24 hours, everyone in the Kuykendall family will get the same text message. "I'm going to kill you." Now, when these messages arrive, they're no longer from Courtney's phone, but they're coming from a restricted number. Okay, weird. So is it still Courtney? Is it not? What is going on at this point? Now, these days, we know a lot about phone cloning and hackers being able to get into your phone, take the details, replicate them. But then about, 2007, that technology wasn't really so well understood. And even if it had been understood at that time, I don't think it would have made a huge difference, because these texts are now just coming from a restricted number. And over the following week, the family begin to receive messages to their phone that say the following: I'm coming to your house to kill you in your sleep. Courtney and her brother, they receive messages saying, you're going to die at school. I'm planning a massacre and I'm coming for you first. Oh, horrendous. The mum and dad of the Kokendo family receive messages saying, I know where you work and I'm watching you every day. The time will come for your life to end. Now, freaking the absolute fuck out as you would, the family beg Courtney to tell them if she's behind this. If this is some kind of prank and she's just taken it too far and it's got out of control, now is the time to confess. Because they can try to put it behind them, they can accept that this was a prank gone wrong, but she needs to be honest. By now, Courtney is devastated that her family just don't believe that she's not behind these messages. Then another weird thing develops. Two different families who live in the same street as the Kokendos, they begin to receive threats of a similar nature. Things like, we're watching you, you're next. Now the texts, this is interesting, they change from I'm watching you or I'm going to kill you in your sleep to we are watching you, you're next. This change from I to we is very, very unsettling. So all the families get together and they decide to talk about it. Now this is the conclusion they arrive at. I can see why they get here, but I don't think that they arrive at the right thing. They basically decide that it has to be someone amongst them. It has to be someone who lives on this street. It's got to be. Now, why do they think that? Well, I'll tell you. It's because some of the texts are just so specific to an event or to a conversation that they say it's like the person who's sending it is in the room with them sometimes. I'll give you an example. The Kokendo family have 2 dogs and they've got nicknames for their dogs. Just like, I've got nicknames for Alfie. Alfred McBumface, the mayor of Uglytown, and my personal favourite, Alfredo de Bonbon, just because that one sounds a wee bit exotic. Sometimes the texts that these families receive will actually use the nicknames of their pets, or will be about things that they discussed over the dinner table, and they're thinking, what is going on here? So they go to the police. Police assure them this is likely to just be a prank. At worst, it might be someone who's got a grudge and they've just taken it too far. But ultimately what the police say to them is, look, don't take this so seriously, okay? Calm down. It's a few messages, someone's pranking you, don't worry about it. Truth be told here, I'm not sure the police really knew what to do with this. Not sure that they actually were that clear on what their next steps should be. But whether the police tell you to relax about it or not, the fact is, it's still bloody creepy. But these messages are not even the half of how creepy it's going to get. The family are all in bed one evening when the landline phone rings in the home. Courtney's dad answers it in a groggy voice, and he hears a scratchy voice on the other end of the line. The voice says, "I'm coming to slit the throats of every family member," and then hangs up. Dad instantly calls the police, who try to trace the call, but with no luck. I mean, okay, at this point, if I was the Kokendo family, just like, move house. It's time to move, right? It's time to pack up your belongings, get out of there. Wherever you're living, go. You just need away from this situation. And also, sorry to break the incredible tension that I've built, but I'm just going to do that line again because honestly, I think I sounded fabulous. I'm coming to slit the throats of every family member. Oh my God. God. Kind of fancy myself a wee bit doing that voice. Wish that was what I mean, obviously the words are horrendous, but oh my God, that sounds so silky. Great. So the phone calls, they keep coming. And now they're coming at all hours of the day. Sometimes they're to the family home, sometimes it's on the personal phones, and it's always threats. But it is so specific. You know, it's things like, "I saw you at the car park at Costco this afternoon. You were alone. Next time, remember, I'm watching." Whew. So now completely freaked out, the Kokendo family go back to police and they start from the beginning, the whole affair. And by this point, because they're starting to receive these calls, police say, "Okay, we'll take another look into it." And they do. Anxiously, the family wait for more texts and more calls, and they just continue. This just keeps going. It's real harassment now. Eventually, the police call them down to the station to tell them what they've discovered. Police sit the Kokendo family down and they say, "You are indeed being targeted, and we're treating this very, very seriously. This is harassment, it's stalking, it's threatening people's lives. But there's just one problem. All of this can be traced back to one person, and it's Courtney. It's the daughter in your family." Now, Courtney is a part of this conversation and she becomes hysterical. Absolutely hysterical, swearing she is not behind this. She is devastated that this is the conclusion that the police have arrived at. She tells her parents this is a mistake. There's no way she's behind this. Now, the whole theory of it being Courtney kind of falls apart with things like when the phone rings at 3 a.m. and it wakes the whole family up and they all gather round the landline in the dark. Courtney's there. So how on earth can she be making the phone call and receiving the phone call at the same time? That's a kind of technology that does not exist. So the conclusion the police have arrived at, the Kokendo family think, no, that's not right. They will admit, yeah, okay, at one point we did think it was Courtney, but we don't anymore. We think it's gone way too far. What's going to really freak the family out, and this I have to say is the bit of the story that gives me the absolute willies. When they get home from the police station, the answer machine in the house is blinking a new message. Now, by this point, they're fully expecting this is going to be another phone call from the restricted number, and it's going to be threats. So they play the message. That's not what it is. The family are utterly shocked to hear the entire conversation that they have just had with police being played back to them on their answer phone. Fucking hell. Okay. At this point, forget my last advice. Don't just move. In this instance, I would burn your house down and run away to Spain. That's the only option here. How the hell did the conversation that was in a private police room get on their answer phone hours later? Now, the next tactic that the family take is to do something that, well, you kind of think this, it might have been an idea to do this a while ago, but just they hadn't done it, and that is to change their numbers. They delete all of their contacts, and that includes the much wider Kekendo family. Everybody gets basically a brand new number. And they get peace. Well, they get peace, but for a day. And then the calls and the messages start again. I'm watching you. You're going to die. By now, the story has reached a journalist at ABC News. And so before the family know what's happening, there's a news crew on the front door and the family are being asked to discuss it. Journalists want an interview with 16-year-old Courtney, and the family basically tell them, get to fuck. Not that Courtney would really, to be honest, have been able to have a conversation, because since coming back from the police station and being accused of this, she has just been hysterical. What journalists do manage to get is an interview with one of the neighbours of the Kekendo family, and she has a weird experience to describe. Just a few nights prior to journalists arriving, she had been in her kitchen, she had been chopping limes for some food she was making, and she was alone in the house. So this neighbour's in her kitchen, la 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 la, chopping up some limes. Don't know what she was making, but here you go, she's making some food, when a text arrives on her phone, and it's from a restricted number. So she panics, knowing everything that's going on next door. She doesn't quite know what to do, but she also can't stop herself from wanting to read the message. And when she opens it, it reads, I prefer lemons. So she freezes in the kitchen with her phone in her hand, knowing that she's home alone, but somebody is watching her. Somebody can see into her kitchen. Nothing, absolutely nothing that the Kekendo family tried worked. They changed numbers again. It didn't work. This same messages found their way to them. They changed home phone number 4 times. The calls still got through. By this point, police are so confused that they call in the FBI. This case, police say, is bigger than them, and they just don't know how to solve it. The FBI, they trawl through this case. They look at the messages, and they are drawing a blank on how the personal details of the family are still coming through in these messages. The investigation the FBI does, it sprawls out into family members, distant family members, co-workers, old enemies, people at Courtney's school, people at the son's school, anyone, just to try and find out who is behind this. This went on, this ordeal, for a full 6 months. day in, day out, relentlessly. The stress that it put the family under was just unbearable. And then it stopped. It just stopped. Like that. Out of nowhere. Now, it would seem that it stopping was a good thing, but there's a question there. Think about yourself. Put yourself in that situation. If you're one of the Kukendo family and you've lived through that for 6 months, would you rather it stopped? Just stopped dead. And you never knew who was behind it, why this happened, or would you rather it continued until the person was caught? Is it creepier to know that that person's still out there? Whoever's behind this has never been caught. For the Kukendo family, it took a long time to sleep properly and to not feel like they were being watched around every corner. It took a lot of therapy, a lot of PTSD work had to be done. And just imagine how it felt every time their phone beeped or the home phone rang. Instant fear. Slowly the FBI pulled away from the investigation, because once it stopped, there was nothing active. But the fear that someone was watching them has never left that family. And that's what makes that story creepy as fuck. Someone is watching. I know where you work, and I'm watching you every day. The time will come for your life to end. We are watching you. You are next. I'm going to slit the throats of every family member. Okay, next on the Creepathon, we are going to Bavaria. You know, place where they make the cheese. And it's 1922. Ah, what a year. Great year that. Loved it. Okay, we're going to the Hinterkaifeck farm. Now, the Hinterkaifeck farm was a really sizable property in a rural part of Bavaria. And this farm had been in the family for many, many years. Now, it currently had 5 members of the family living there. And so, oldest to youngest, they went like this. Kazilla was 72. Andreas was 63. And they were the owners, really, of the farm. And they had family living with them. They had their daughter Victoria, who was 35, and they had Victoria's 2 young children. One was 7 and one was 2. But they also had someone else there, and that was the maid, Maria. Now, Maria didn't live all the time at the farm. She would sometimes stay overnight, depending on the work that had to be done and on the workload. But actually she lived with her sister. So, Maria, let's start with her, because she's an important place to start the story. Maria, I just met a girl called Maria. There you go. Bit of a 42nd Street for you. Now, she'd only been there for 6 months. And although she'd been a maid for a long time for other families, she was new on this farm. Why? Well, the previous maid had left because she was creeped out by the place. When the previous maid was going around and cleaning and cooking, often she'd be stopped in her tracks by a noise coming from somewhere within the house that she couldn't account for. So it would be like a banging in the attic. And it would make her stop and think, who the hell is banging? She would look around and think, the family are all out of the house. I'm the only one here. So where's that coming from? Now, a good few times she went to Andreas to report this, but he paid no attention. He thought it was an overactive imagination in the maid. Now, it wasn't just the banging alone that made her quit her job. Not at all. It was other things like a day where a strange newspaper was lying around the house. And it was a newspaper from Munich that the maid knew the family don't purchase this newspaper. This isn't one that they buy, so how the hell did it get here? Now, when she raised this, no one in the family seemed particularly bothered about the odd newspaper, but it just didn't sit correctly with the maid. So she asked them again, how did the newspaper get here? And they said, look, perhaps the postman was delivering it somewhere else and he's accidentally dropped it off. The farm didn't have that many visitors. Occasionally someone from a nearby farm would be passing and would pop in for a cup of tea, but in terms of visitors, not really. So the postman seemed like the most logical explanation. But this wasn't really good enough for the maid. She went on and on about this newspaper so often that Andreas eventually said, oh, look, I think maybe I picked it up somewhere and I forgot that I picked it up, okay? Now that was just to shut her up going on about it, and it wasn't a good enough answer for her. She just couldn't relax in this house. She felt like she was never alone. Even when she knew she should be alone, she didn't feel it. Not being believed by the family, she would go home to her own family and complain to them. There's something weird going on at the Hinter Kaifleck farm. Something odd is going on there. Now, she had a suspicion. She had a suspicion that she felt stupid saying it, but she thought someone was living in the house that the family didn't know about. She had this feeling that there was the presence of someone else there. But given the way that she was dismissed for her noises in the attic and the strange newspaper, she thought, I better not give this theory out loud because I'll just be shot down in flames. What a nightmare for her, not being believed. It's a rubbish feeling, not being believed. It's like when people don't believe me when I say that I invented true crime podcasts. I mean, it's really annoying. So, one evening, this maid is working late. The family were home, but there again were these noises in the attic. It was footsteps. So she marches into the living room and she says, look, I know I've said this a lot of times and you don't believe me, but listen, there's footsteps in the attic. And actually this time, the family sit up and pay attention. Andreas goes to investigate, only to discover nothing when he goes and he looks. But they definitely had heard something. Later that night, there's a snowfall in this area of Bavaria. And when the family wakes up, it looks like a winter wonderland. And then something confuses them. There's a set of footsteps leading from a nearby forest right up to the farm's machine room. But no one had been outside or near the machine room. So whose footsteps were they? The lock on the door to the machine room has been broken. But inside, there's no trace of anyone, and there's no trace of anything out of place. By this time, the family are actually starting to believe the maid, and so they feel that Andreas should go to the police. Something's up, something's not right. But Andreas felt this would be a waste of police time. Now we know all of these details because the maid was telling all of this to her family. So the maid leaves. She decides to leave the farm. She doesn't like it. She gets a job somewhere else. And this is when the family employ Maria Baumgartner. Again, an experienced maid. And on that day, she's dropped off at the farm by her sister. What her sister could never know is that it would be the last time she ever saw Maria. It would be 4 days later before the bodies were found. When the bodies were discovered, the scene was one of total horror. In the barn, the dead and butchered bodies of Andreas, his wife Kazilla, his daughter Victoria, and 7-year-old Kazilla were found lying on the floor of the barn covered in hay. Inside the house, the 2-year-old Joseph lay dead on the kitchen floor and the maid Maria on the living room floor. They had each been brutally murdered with a small axe. Their faces had been hacked, their bodies, their limbs covered in cut marks. The 7-year-old was found with clumps of her own hair in her hand, which police would later say signs that she had survived the brutal attack and was so scared that she had, in fear and terror, begun to pull out her own hair. When police looked around the crime scene, one of the things that confused them the most is the fact that the family dogs were quite happy. They seemed well fed and content. They noticed that in the kitchen some meat which the family had put out had been very recently carved. By touching the fire in the living room, they could tell that the fire had been on only a few hours before. So adding all of this up, police arrived at the conclusion that whoever did this then stayed in the family home for the next 4 days, eating the family food, lighting the fire, and looking after the dogs, while these bodies lay scattered around the place. A huge investigation would begin. There were lots of different suspects. The daughter, Victoria, of the family, she had an ex-husband who had a temper, but when police looked into that, he had an alibi. as they went round and they spoke to people, a neighbour from a nearby farm mentioned that he had been walking past the farm in those 4 days and he'd seen the chimney smoking, and assuming that the family were probably gathered after dinner, he might pop in for a quick cup of tea, quickly to say hello, but that as he approached the gate leading up to the farm, he said a bright light shone in his eyes and it temporarily blinded him. He had no idea where this bright light came from, but it blinded him as he got to the gate, and he was so disorientated that he just walked the other way. Police decided this must have been the killer. This killer must have been waiting for someone to come to that farm. Along the list of suspects, there were people from the town questioned, family members questioned, but police could find nothing to link any of these people to these brutal, horrendous murders. And to this day, the murders at the Hinterkaifeck farm remain a mystery and creepy as fuck. The farm would eventually be knocked down, and a memorial to those who died in that massacre still stands today. And so ends the episode. Alright, Treacle, I hope you enjoyed that. What have you learned? Let's sum up what you've learned. I think what you've learned is basically don't own a mobile phone because it'll kill you. And if you live in a farm, move. And if you live on a farm and you've got a mobile phone, see you later. You're out of here. Something bad's going to happen. I'm kidding. Okay, I hope you enjoyed that little foray into the creepiness. It's been lovely to talk to you again. As always, get in touch. Say hello. Always lovely to hear from you. And yeah, until we speak again, be well. Okay? Goodbye.
It didn't affect me really one way or the other. I would imagine from the look on his face. Let's get it on. Let's do it. Let's get it over. Let's get it on. Let's do it. Let's get it over.